If you live anywhere but here, odds are that the pizza you order at your local pizza place will not look like this, but rather like this, or this. So, what caused pizza to mutate into these various different forms? Depending on which side you're on, you might want to thank the Americans for making pizza the thing it is today. You could also just blame the bloody Americans. They ruined pizza. And then they go off and say, oh, they invented it. Regardless of which side you're on, you're kind of right, in a way. But it's not just these Americans that did it. It's a bit more complicated. In our previous pizza video, which you can find here, we promised to make a separate American pizza video if enough people asked for it, because we thought it was oversimplifying things to say that American pizza is just what Neapolitan migrants made once they crossed the ocean. Anyway, if our viewer demographic is anything to go by, the pizza you eat on the regular was shaped by diaspora. And this didn't just happen in New York. But of course, we'll start with the famous one, the one for which you probably clicked this video, New York, the Big Apple. According to Carol Helstosky, southern Italian migrants started arriving in New York in the late 19th century, and they brought pizza with them. A good chunk of the migrant population were factory workers, so they appreciated a cheap meal on their way to work. Most of them were Catholics, and they liked having a nice meat-free meal on Fridays as well. Some pizzas were made at home, but they were more commonly made and bought from bakeries, as these bakeries would have the coal ovens which were hot enough to properly cook the dough. The most famous of these bakeries was the legendary Lombardi's. They started out as a shop for Italian groceries, before discovering that pizza was a great way to dispose of day-old bread. In 1905, they were the officially first licensed pizzeria in New York, selling pizza alongside the usual groceries. The pizzeria was such a success that by 1930, Lombardi's became a fully pizza restaurant. A pizzeria with big hot ovens that makes pizzas even today. And of course, people would work at Lombardi's and then they would go on to start their own restaurants in sort of the same style. Lombardi's and its children used coal-fire ovens rather than wood-fired ovens like you would see in Naples, since coal was a lot easier to get and store in New York at the time. But apart from that, these pizzas would be pretty similar to their southern Italian counterparts. They were sold as full pies, as they would eventually start to call them, and baked at high heat, albeit with a different fuel. What we find very interesting is that in our original pizza video, we saw how Lazzaroni, Naples' poor, bought pizza on the street. This pizza was cheap and often made from day-old bread or whatever was available. Then in the course of the 19th century, it was brought indoors and cleaned up as the pizzeria became a thing. Here in New York, we see the exact same evolution. Quick bites for poor factory workers turning into a thriving new type of restaurant. Still affordable, but definitely a cut above where it was a few decades prior. But if the pizzas were so similar, how come New York pizza is so different? We all know that New York pizza is sold by the slice, right? Well, there's some debate on that. Ed Levine from Serious Eats thinks that the biggest factor is, again, the fuel. You see, in the 1940s and especially in the 1950s, New York pizzerias started cooking with gas. Gas ovens were on the rise as they were smaller, cheaper, cleaner burning, lots of good stuff. But there was one massive downside. They were much colder. While wood and coal fires can easily get up to 400 degrees Celsius, these gas ovens struggled to get to 280. This is warmer than your domestic oven, but still a really big drop. If you are making like traditional pizza, this is a problem. The high heat serves to sort of really quickly cook the dough while not giving the toppings the time to dry out. This is why Neapolitan ovens have to be that warm. However, New York pizza makers quickly turned this bug into a feature. By cooking the pizza for longer at a lower heat, the toppings, as you would expect, did dry out. Now, a Neapolitan might say that this is ruined, but the American saw a pizza that could be reheated. So as early as the 1940s, some New York pizzerias started selling slices that could be eaten right there and then, as per usual, or reheated after they had gone cold. by the 1950s, some New York pizzerias started doing deliveries. There are a few more differences between Naples and New York pizzas, which we'll touch on as we make them side by side. For our Neapolitan one, we are using our own adaptation of a coccia and sobrio recipe. Now, we will be using our domestic oven, so any form of authenticity is already out the window. For our New York style pie, we are using our own adaptation of a Cangi Alt Lopez recipe. As per usual, all links below. Let's start with our dough. For our Italian style pizza, we are going to need to make one pizza, 160 grams of 00 or 00 flour, in which we're mixing 100 grams of water, in which we've already dissolved about 10 grams of fresh yeast, and 5 grams of salt. That's it, quite easy. Now for our New York style slice, we'll be adding some things to make it more crisp and more suited for low temperature baking. We'll start with 210 grams of bread flour. Now this makes sense because we want our dough to result in a crispier crust, so therefore we're using a more high protein flour. And also high protein flour was more available west of the Atlantic. To this we're adding 5 grams of sugar, 3 grams of salt, 3-ish grams of instant yeast, 130 to 140 milliliters of water and 50 mils of olive oil. Combine everything in a stand mixer and mix for 5 to 10 minutes. Once both have been kneaded nice and smooth, give the New York one an oil coating, while the Naples one gets a slight flour dusting. Put both of them in a container and ideally fridge them overnight. So far these are all subtle differences. Nothing too shocking. But now we get to the sauce. On our previous video, a lot of people commented that the tomato sauce was a thing that came out of America and was then brought back to Italy, hence proving the pizza effect. However, for our Italian sauce, we need peeled tomatoes, canned when out of season, fresh when in season, crush them by hand and add nothing. That's right, Neapolitan pizza to this day doesn't use sauce. It's just tomatoes. You don't even salt them. Meanwhile, in New York, this is where the cook shines. Every pizza place has its own sauce with garlic, onions, sugar and so on. Take a little pan and saute some finely chopped onions. Add some crushed garlic, tinned tomatoes, which we've blended, and a pinch of sugar, salt, pepper and pretty much whatever you want in there. Why did New Yorkers start cooking their sauce and adding a bunch of stuff to it? We don't know for sure, but our theory is that while Neapolitans could just go outside and pluck a tomato off the slopes of Mount Vesuvius, New Yorkers had to rely on tinned or canned ones, especially in the earlier 20th century. So it makes sense that they got into the habit of adding some extra flavors in there just to balance everything out. There's debate about whether the sauce should be cooked, and a lot of people, correctly, point out that tinned tomatoes are already cooked in the process of tinning. Therefore, these days, the rule is, it's up to you, do what you like. But we are cooking our sauce mainly because we want to delineate between Neapolitan and New York pizza. Now to shape the pizzas. For the Neapolitan style, we'll try the faint schiappo or slapping. We'll fail and then just go on to stretch them. For our New York style, there's no set way. Often the weight of the dough is used for stretching. As long as you don't use a rolling pin, you're fine. That seems to be the only rule that survived. Normally, you should go really big, allowing for selling by the slice. However, we are limited by the size of our oven, so ours won't be that big. On Team Naples, add your crushed tomatoes, some fresh mozzarella, put on some basil leaves, and then sprinkle over a little bit of olive oil. If you want, you can add an optional dusting of pecorino. Meanwhile, on our New York pizza, we first start with our sauce and then just put on a thick layer of shredded mozzarella. The low moisture stuff, none of that Italian wet stuff. Then a good dusting of oregano and then some pecorino or parmesan just to add some umami. The Italian one goes in the oven for as long as is needed to bake the dough. That's 4-ish minutes in our oven, which has a pizza steel. The American one can stay in there for a good 8 minutes. And here are our 2 pizzas. One should be eaten with a knife and fork, but the other one is best sliced and eaten in slices, folded. If you've enjoyed the video so far, it would be lovely if you could hit the subscribe button. If you're already a subscriber, could you please hit the like button? It really helps us out. Thank you very much. What we found very surprising about the story of New York pizza is that, like in Naples, you see the pizza go from the street to the restaurant. But in New York, you see it go from the street to the restaurant and then back out to the street. So what caused that return to the street? Well, we're not entirely sure, but probably the by-the-slice pizza gelled really well with the rise of takeaway and fast food that grew in the 1950s and 60s in America. It also fitted more with the hustle and bustle of a city which, by now, had become the economic heart of the world. New Yorkers, we don't have friggin' time to sit down and have like a whole pizza with a knife and fork. We got shit to do. Sometimes you just need a quick slice. I have no idea what came over me there. Is one better than the other? Well, that's down to taste. We have a fondness for the Neapolitan one, but we are very European. Learning the story of the New York pizza really made us appreciate the humble slice a lot more. Also, we have to admit, the New York pizza recipe works a lot better in a home oven. Let's see if we can also get this in the next city we're going to, which is Buenos Aires. As with all things Latin American, football is somehow involved. Just like with New York, the immigration from Italy to Buenos Aires started in the second half of the 19th century. But unlike with New York, a lot of these immigrants came from Liguria and its capital Genoa, which is in the north of Italy. As you would expect, they also brought their food with them. Firstly, there was the Genovese focaccia, or fugaze as they call it in Genoa, which in Argentina evolved into the fugazzetta. Essentially a block of melted cheese and onions, and there's bread in there somewhere. It's a cousin of the pizza, which we're not going to talk about because then we'd have to make one, and with all the pizzas we're making, we'd, die. Another thing the Genovese immigrants brought with them was the farinata, a pancake made from chickpea flour. Add in the Ligurian accent and a transatlantic crossing, translate into Spanish, and it becomes faina. It's a quick, high-protein bite which was popular with factory workers and became a staple food of the La Boca area of Buenos Aires. If La Boca sounds familiar, that's probably because of this. When football clubs Boca Juniors and River Plate were founded in Buenos Aires in the early 20th century, the faina stands quickly became a staple around the stadiums on match days. Making faina is really straightforward. Oil up an iron pan with some olive oil, then put this pan in the oven at 220 degrees Celsius to preheat. While your pan is warming up, take 125 grams of chickpea flour, mix this with a pinch of salt, and gradually add 300 milliliters of water while stirring it with a whisk or a wooden spoon until you've got a smooth batter. You can add other flavorings to it, but we're not going to, and you'll see why in a bit. Take your pan out of the oven, whoa, watch out, that's hot, and pour your batter in it. Put your batter and pan back in the oven for about 20 minutes. These are the specifications for our pan and oven. You'll have to play around with yours until you get it right. When done, take your faina out of the pan and let it cool down. Well, we'll leave it for now, we'll get to it. So by this time you're probably wondering, where are the pizzas? Well, nobody really knows why, but up until the mid-1920s, there weren't that many in Argentina. That is if you don't count the fugazzetta. There was a pizza recipe published in an Argentinian cookbook in 1914, but that was still the Artusi-style sweet pizza. But then, in the 1930s, there were suddenly loads. And these were apparently the pizza that we would recognize as pizza today. We don't know what exactly triggered it. One theory is that the Great Depression caused some internal migration within Argentina, ushering some people of southern Italian descent to the capital. Then the quick boom can be explained by the pizzerias not having to start from scratch. The bakeries and restaurants that were already making the fugazzetta and the faina were able to very quickly adopt the pizza. And this makes sense. They had the shared Italian roots and, well, they already had the ovens. So as a result, they developed a bit of a habit of serving pizza alongside faina. And eventually, at one point, somebody put faina on pizza. And that's still done to this day. And this is called pizza al caballero, or pizza like a knight, which is really cute. It really makes sense. I love pizza, don't get me wrong. But as nice as pizza is, it always leaves me a bit empty, even though it's quite greasy and carby, because it can be quite low in protein. Putting a layer of chickpeas on top would help with that. We were very surprised when learning about this combo, and it's not bad. Heavy though. Today you can find all sorts of pizzas in Argentina. However, the most popular one seems to be the pizza de molde, which is cooked in a deep pan or dish, which might remind you of another type of famous pizza from the New World. However, before we head there, we're going to quickly drop by Brazil, more specifically Sao Paulo. Like all other cities we've mentioned, Sao Paulo has a huge Italian community, dating back to the late 19th century. Like with New York and Buenos Aires, those surnames are not a coincidence. And it shows in their love for pizza. So, in the late 19th century, pizzas were sold on the street as street food, like the Neapolitan pizzaiolas of old. Over time, Brazil did what Brazil does best and made a delightful mix of all their cultural influences. Today you can get many different types there that would be regarded as, to say the least, unorthodox in a lot of pizza cities. One theory is that this started when Portuguese-style bakers like Italian pizza makers used their ovens and they got some ideas. We don't know for sure if this was the case, but it sounds plausible. Ironically, despite all the new varieties, the typical Sao Paulo pizza is still quite Italian. Take your preferred dough, put on some tomatoes, we're going Italian style here, just tomatoes, no seasoning. Then add slices of Brazilian calabrese sausage. Top off with some raw onions. Cook like you would any other pizza. And enjoy pizza calabrese de Sao Paulo. Now we get to Chicago and the US's Midwest. As the 20th century progressed, the pizza started spreading throughout the United States, more so than other Italian dishes. Why? Well, Carol Helstosky theorizes that the ease with which pizza could be served at fairs was a great boon for its national popularity. On top of that, pizza also became a sort of flag bearer for the Italian community. It's not a coincidence that this song is about pizza and not spaghetti. As part of this charm offensive, loads of recipes started appearing, allowing pizza to be made at home. In the for-the-home recipes, there were things like English muffin pizza, pizza with a muffin as a base, so the dough didn't need to be cooked from scratch, and something called tomato pies. The latter one is a pizza made in a pie tin. The tin allows for the pizza to be made with the heat of a domestic oven. It's very likely that this is also why the most popular pizza in Argentina is made in a pan. Tins and trays are very popular workarounds with a lack of super hot wood or coal fire ovens, like they have in the pizzerias of Naples. Even in Italy, pizza in teglia is popular in places where wood-fired ovens aren't that commonplace. So during the war, an appetite for thick, chunky pizzas swept the United States. Often these recipes would include loads of hearty toppings. No, not that. It was more things like mince and sausage. But it's a good shout, they were looking to add more protein. A type of pizza that gained massive popularity in the United States' Northeast and later the Midwest was the tomato pie. Now, this is apparently not to be confused with the southern. No, not that far south. We're talking about the southern United States here. No, Dixie. From what we've read, there is a southern tomato pie, or tomato pie, which goes back centuries. The northern tomato pie is a different animal, and the one we're discussing here. Just to be clear, the word tomato pie starts appearing in articles in the early 20th century. And is initially used to describe the pizza made by Italian immigrants, sort of to give people who didn't know what it was a point of reference. It's possible that Americans call pizzas pies today because of this, because in Europe we don't do that. Then, during the war years, as pizza made its charm offensive into the US, recipes for tomato pie started appearing in newspapers. These are adjusted for the home kitchen and the American preference for thicker, heartier pizza. Some recipes even call for the use of shop-bought pre-made biscuit doughs. Do not mistake this with English biscuit dough, although that would make for a very funny pizza. Anyway, some theorize that the Italian-American tomato pie is a transatlantic version of the Sicilian sfincione. Carol Helstosky includes a 1947 recipe in her book, so we are going to make that one. We can't get American-style biscuit dough here, so we're using one of our Kenji Alt Lopez pizza doughs. Spread your dough in a lightly oiled pie tin, then put in layers of dry mozzarella and then a layer of fresh tomatoes. You can use tinned ones if you can't get your hands on good tomatoes. Cover with a layer of parmesan, dried oregano, salt and pepper, topped off with a drizzle of olive oil. Now bake in a preheated oven at 260 degrees Celsius for 20 minutes. And here is a pizza in a deep dish. It's not Chicago deep dish. There are tons of videos on that and it would be too much of a tangent. We've never had Chicago deep dish, but judging by the recipes out there, we're pretty confident in saying that this is much lighter and much more home kitchen friendly. And that's important. You see, at this point in history, pizza had been fully adopted by America. It was moving into the home and deeper into the American mainstream identity, becoming slowly uncoupled from its Italian origin. In 1958, the first Pizza Hut opened in Wichita, and 2 years later, Tom and James Monahan opened Dominic's, you can see where that went, in Michigan. Good luck finding the Italian connection there. Pizza Hut and Domino's led the pizza as fast food wave and pitched their pan-baked, thick-crusted, abundantly topped pizzas to a nation that had made these their own. From here on, capitalism did the rest. Pizza as an American convenience food spread across the free world, and as soon as the Berlin Wall came down, the rest of the world. And nowadays you can find
places like this, or this, pretty much everywhere. Now, does that mean that Americans ruined pizza? Well, you could say that if places like this had completely displaced the traditional Neapolitan pizza. But that hasn't happened. They're doing just fine. They even have their own chains now. This one's even recognized by the silly pizza police. Now, we know we have all these options because we live in a very large city. And we did say at the beginning of the video that if you live somewhere other than southern Italy, odds are that your local pizza is probably the American style. However, traditional Neapolitan pizza is probably more widely available than ever before. And it probably has the success of its American children to thank for that. Now get down in the comments and let us know what the most available pizza is where you live. Is it American? Is it traditional Neapolitan? Or is it some mixture of the two? Or maybe it's something Latin American, something very funky. Whatever it is, we want to know, especially if you're from a country that we haven't mentioned in this video.
Yes, we prefer a classic Neapolitan pizza, but we know plenty of people who kind of prefer the fast food ones. It's a matter of taste, really. Helstosky often points out that the big pies of Chicago and the Midwest are weirdly reminiscent of the big fruit pies we saw in Scappi's opera. In that same manner, you can think about it like this. They started on the streets of Naples, but became fancy in pizzerias. Then crossed the Atlantic, where they again fed the poor in the streets and factories and football fans, to then slowly move into trendy restaurants, only to go back to being the food of the poor, students and, well, frankly, people who can't cook. And then round again, so now there's sort of all these things at once.
Like this place.
They seem to be inherently cyclical. Oh, that's a very good point. Yeah, but what about the square ones? We hope you enjoyed this video. More to come soon. Thank you very much for watching.